Getting to the point where your nonprofit can generate revenue consistently can take a while, but what if there were some things you could do that could expedite it? I've talked before in other videos about things I wish I'd done differently in the early days of starting my own nonprofit, to include thinking more strategically about fundraising. Looking back, I can identify the point in my organization's history where we went from stagnating with inconsistent funding and revenue to being able to grow and sometimes even double our budget year to year during a more aggressive growth phase. So in this video, I want to share my own personal experience on the two things that I did that made the difference to help us grow our revenue faster. Welcome back. I'm Amber Melanie Smith. I'm a nonprofit founder, former executive director, and I make these videos here on YouTube to help people make an impact, whether that's through starting a nonprofit, socially conscious business, or other way. Don't forget to subscribe to my new newsletter coming out this summer. It's going to have actionable tips, how-to guides, funding opportunities, and more. You don't want to miss it. The link to subscribe is below. Okay, let's get right into these two things. Quick disclaimer, this is my personal experience. This is how I approached things in the nonprofit that I started. Every nonprofit is different, but I firmly believe that these two things are smart things to think about in your own organization to at least consider whether or not they might work for you. Okay, the first thing that we did in my own organization that was the first step to growing our revenue more consistently and faster was to diversify our funding, to shift away from primarily relying on donations and grants to more earned income and program service fees. Let's recap what is earned income, what are program fees. So nonprofits make money in a lot of different ways. The most commonly thought of ways are donations and grants, but nonprofits can also earn revenue from the sale of goods or services. So that is earned income. That is program fees. Nonprofits can, just like businesses, sell their goods or services. The difference is that nonprofits have to sell goods or services that directly further their mission. They can't sell random things or services that have nothing to do with their mission. So if I'm a nonprofit and I sell a t-shirt, the act of selling that t-shirt has nothing to do with my mission. It has nothing to do, like the act of selling the t-shirt doesn't accomplish a community impact by itself. But instead, if I'm the Red Cross and I charge $40 to do CPR training or certification for someone, then the act of offering that CPR training actually is furthering my mission of helping create a disaster-ready community, right? So the actual act of that sale is literally achieving my mission. So nonprofits have to think of it like that. Anytime you go to a nonprofit museum and you buy a registration ticket to see an exhibit, that's earned income. If you go to a nonprofit theater and see a show and you buy a ticket, that's earned income. So thinking about something like this, that might be a good fit for your organization. I have another video where I cover several examples of ways nonprofits can charge for their services. So what are some different examples of program fees? You might want to check out that other video to get a more in-depth look at some of those ideas. So if you want to explore how to do this, the first thing you need to think about is who in your community or your networks keeps coming to your organization in search of certain types of services, and consistently who can afford to pay for these services, who has funding or resources to be able to pay for these services. Most of the time in nonprofits, most of the population, or at least some of the population we're serving, might not be able to afford paying for services, which is why we find other parties, other stakeholders who do have funding that can pay for adjacent services. And that's part of the program fee model, right? So in the case of my own nonprofit, we consistently had companies who were coming to our organization asking us to plan these big social impact events for them. So one day, after studying similar models, similar revenue models in other organizations, we decided to start asking these companies for a fee to plan these social impact events for them. So companies started paying my organization to plan these big events for them, these social impact events. And that also achieved our mission, because our mission as an organization was to get more people involved in social impact work and volunteering and service. So by doing this legwork for the companies, it was a win-win because they didn't have to do all that work. They were making a good contribution to our organization, and we were experts in how to do it because we've been doing it for so long anyways and really know our community and how to put on a good event. This started bringing in a significant portion of our annual revenue as an organization, which is great because then the net profits from these events we could reinvest back into the rest of our mission, covering the costs of the programs we were offering to people who could not pay for those services. For example, if we partnered with a Title I school to do something like a big school makeover project, that school doesn't have the resources. They're not paying for that. But if we can get a company to pay for it, then everyone wins. Part of the decision to do this as an earned income model as our program fees was knowing that this was really part of our team's skill set. We were really, really good at this thing, at doing these events. And so because we were really, really good at it, arguably better than anyone else in the community, it was honestly a really good investment for a company to just pay us to do it for them and for us to be able to reinvest any net income into the rest of our mission. So just to recap, a couple steps to think about how to do this. First is to think about your organization's mission and your team's core competencies. So what are you trying to achieve to benefit the community, and what is your team really skilled at? Second, think about parts of your mission and what do people, companies, or other organizations always come to your organization asking you to do or wishing you would do that might not already be part of the free or no cost programming that you're offering the community. Next is who can pay for this. So what are the audiences that you might serve or partner with who might have the resources to be able to cover the costs of some of these program fees? In the case of our organization, it was the companies. We wouldn't charge random individuals to put on these events, but companies had the resources, so we would charge them. There's another great organization in my community that provides support to people who have problems with substance abuse. They wouldn't charge those people for their support services, but then they have a moving company that employs those people who are recovering, and people pay for the moving services. So they found another group of people who had the resources to cover the costs of some of the programming that then in turn also helps their main client. And finally, you want to think about what is the price point that your paying audience can afford to justifiably pay for the service. And obviously it has to be what the market will bear. You can't just pick a random number. You have to pick a number that makes sense for what the service or product is. Okay, so we talked about thing number one that we did. The second thing that my organization did to rapidly grow revenue much faster than we had in the years prior was invest more in our staff infrastructure and capacity. So the fact is, it takes more staff capacity to grow the organization, especially if you're hiring staff to oversee the earned income or program fees product or service that you just put in place. I used to be really annoyed at the phrase, it takes money to make money, until I realized just how true it was. So the trick here is once you start bringing in some revenue to get really smart about how you invest it in your capacity and in things that are going to in turn help your organization take the next step in its growth. This seems kind of obvious, but when I think about scrappy nonprofit startup founders, including myself back in the day, our mentality tends to be, oh, we've got to save as much money as possible, be as lean as possible. But in my experience, and actually there's some great research to back this up, if you invest too little in your capacity and your infrastructure, you're going to grow way slower than if you just quickly invested in your staffing and your capacity when you can. When I was a founder, I would do everything that the organization needed because I thought that I had to. I was building our organization's website. I was doing our social media. I was doing our accounting. I was doing all of it. But that doesn't mean I'm great or good at all of those things. It just means I felt falsely that I had to be responsible for all of them. But the second I started delegating and hiring people who were way better at those things than me, we grew a lot faster. And part of the reason for this is I know my strengths. My skills were in fundraising and outreach and community building and public speaking. And if I was spending too much of my time doing those things like accounting or website building instead of fundraising or outreach, then I'm actually not doing my best work for the organization. And when I free myself up to do that work, then we're all gonna be a lot better off. So just final words of wisdom on this. Think about your own personal strengths if you're a founder and how you might be able to find others who are skilled in the other things that you need to do. That's part one. And part two is once you figure out if you decide to do an earned income or program fee model, once you figure out what that's gonna look like, figure out how you can hire someone as quickly as possible to manage it so that you can focus on other revenue streams. All right, I'd love to hear what you think at this point. How are you thinking about diversifying your organization's revenue or exploring what types of revenue is going to be the best fit for your organization, even if it's not earned income? And how are you thinking about investing in staff capacity? Share in the comments below. If you are thinking about starting a nonprofit or in those early stages, I have online materials for you that might be helpful at my website, foundertofulltime.com. I've got courses, blog articles, etc. Check those out. And of course, my newsletter linked below with tips, strategies, funding opportunities, all of that good stuff. Don't forget to subscribe to that, and you can opt out anytime it's not bringing you value. Finally, check out my group on Facebook, Change the World or Bust. We've got over 6,000 people in there now who are from all over the world making an impact in their own ways, and we'd love to have you join our little changemaker community. So come on by and I'll see you later. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.